Welcome to Uncomfortable, conversations about culture and Christianity. My name is Eric, and today I get the honor of being joined by Brant Hansen. He's the author of the book Unoffendable, which we're currently going through as a church right now. Blessed are the misfits, the truth about us, and recently the men we need. He's also a syndicated radio host. You've been on radio for a number of years.
Yeah, a long time. Yeah.
Thanks for being here.
My pleasure. This is great.
Okay.
Yeah.
Hopefully you feel at home with a microphone and headphones.
I should. If I don't, that's my own. Actually, I love the fact that it's called Uncomfortable.
Okay.
Because I usually bring that awkwardness myself, but just to call it that.
Yeah.
Sorry. Like, this is going to be a sweet spot.
When we were coming up with a name, we're like, well, we need to have more uncomfortable conversations. Let's just call it that and make it easy for people to know what they're getting into.
Very good. I bring uncomfortability to every conversation on accident. I honestly do. I feel like I don't know how to do small talk very well, and so I've tried to get good at it. And when I think I'm doing great, apparently people are like, it's still awkward. So, yeah.
There's three of us that kind of host the podcast. It's Alex and Jess, and whenever we have a guest, we kind of draw straws or maybe fight a little more for. And I gotta say, I full disclosure, hadn't really heard of you before we started doing this series. I started reading your book Unoffendable, and I was like, okay, I think I want to talk to this guy a little more because I'm like, I feel like a little bit of a kindred spirit here with some of this. Like the small talk thing, you said that right away, and I'm always that way. I hate small talk.
Yes.
It's like, I don't want to talk about the weather.
Right.
I don't, this is weird, these formalities. Let's just have a real conversation.
It's not that you're not interested in people. Honestly, it's like you are.
Yeah.
But I want to skip past this so I can get to know what makes you tick. What do you think about big stuff? Like I'm all about that. So yeah,
that's great.
Yeah.
So you're tell us just for our listeners maybe who aren't familiar with you, what's a little bit of your background, your family, a little bit of that, just the small talk stuff. Let's get that out of the way.
Right. So, but I'll go deep fast on that. Okay. Like I'm from the Midwest, like Illinois and Indiana, little towns. We moved a lot. My dad was a pastor.
Okay. But
our home was pretty traumatic, and we went through a lot of fear. And so a couple divorces. Actually, my parents got married to each other again and then divorced again. And so my brother and I went through an awful lot. And my mom went through an awful lot. So that definitely shaped me because coming from a pastor, like lots of sermons, but didn't, like the home was terrifying. So, yeah, that's my background, and I think that has affected how I talk or think about faith or even come to Jesus. So, yeah.
Yeah, and you. So, where are you located right now? I
live in Jupiter, Florida.
Okay, all right.
Which is totally awesome, and every morning I wake up, I'm like, thank you, Lord. But just being from small town Illinois, I'm used to being cold and stuff, and Jupiter's fantastic.
Never cold, then.
No, it's fantastic.
All right, so your family's there. Wife?
Yeah, wife and two kids who are grown up. Okay. We've been married 33 years now, and our son is in med school, and he's doing great. Our daughter just had our first grandkid. She and her husband are fantastic. So, yeah, that's what's up.
So your book Unoffendable, it's really resonated with a lot of people. And I mean, when this was introduced to me, I assumed, this had been written probably 2021. We really, it felt like a journey I had been on since the pandemic to now myself of like trying to figure out why am I personally so offended and why are others so offended by things? And it just felt very pertinent to this moment in time. And then I looked at the copyright date and I'm like, this was written in 2015.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, have you added prophet to your resume?
Yeah. I don't. Am I some kind of Nostradamus? I don't know. I mean, if people want to say that, that's out there. I can't control that.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was a big deal though. Anger has always been a big thing for humans from the beginning.
Yeah.
Like Adam and Eve have two kids. What happens? For the first two boys, like that. So it just happened to become more and more obvious that we have an anger epidemic. We got an anger problem. And the weird thing is, too, like if you read Washington Post, New York Times, or any number of publications that are talking about anger in our culture, like they're all observing post-Trump election in 2016. Like, we have an anger problem in this country. But they don't know what to do about it.
Yeah.
So it's the same discussion every single time of like, well, you need to go for a walk, maybe listen to some music, take a deep breath, do some yoga. It was like none of this gets at the heart. And I am convinced that Jesus is a genius in addition to being God himself in the flesh. Like he's the smartest man who ever lived. And he's giving us this way of living that's forgiveness. like they should include that in the list because this is the thing that actually works.
Right.
It's the only thing that works.
Well, and I would say for my personal journey, I always kind of thought of myself as I'm not a very offendable guy. Like I kind of prided myself in that, at least from a cultural standpoint. As a Christian, I looked at culture and I went, oh, they're going to do what culture does. I'm not going to let it bother me. It's whatever.
Right.
But then I realized at the core of it, especially during the pandemic and some of the stuff that went on over that trajectory, I was finding that I was most offended at my family. And by that, I mean Christians.
Yep.
And it's just like, that's where I've had to grow in a lot of ways because I'm like, I'm embarrassed sometimes and I'm upset with it. I'm thinking, why are you doing this? Why are you talking this way? Why are you acting this way? This doesn't add up. And I would get pretty kind of loud about it and animated. And then reading this book, I'm like, okay, this is something that's been on my heart. I just haven't really expressed it in a way. And this has kind of put words to what I'm feeling. Like this is that thing you got to get over.
Good.
Yeah.
I think for me, like from my background, I went through a lot of that stuff earlier on. I had to make peace with that disconnect between you're behaving this way and you're saying this, and this doesn't even connect to Jesus. I don't understand that, like all of that. So when I see some people even like do deconstructing of their faith, I'm kind of like, yeah, I've been through that. It's been a long time.
Yeah.
But I had to make peace with the fact that we're seriously broken and messed up. And I am. So like whatever grace has been afforded to me, I have to extend that to other people. That's the basis for it.
Yeah.
So I've done like TED Talks or TEDx or whatever. Like I've talked to secular groups too and companies or whatever. Like this is still the best way to live, this forgiveness thing. But the resource that I have is my own forgiveness from God. And so that's the resource for your Christian brothers and sisters you get frustrated with, or you can watch your news channel of choice and all they do is mock or put the other people in the worst light possible. They caricaturize them. Like the resource for forgiving these people is God forgave you. So that's something I had to work through a long time ago to work through that disconnect. So I'm not scandalized by the way Christians act.
Yeah.
I kind of expect it. I'm not saying it's okay.
Yeah.
But it's just like, this is me too. We're messed up. And I think it's probably good to go through that process, and then you become a actually more graceful person with everybody.
What is your response when people say, oh, this sounds kind of like you're just being pacifist and you're not really getting to the root of the problem. You're just ignoring that there's a problem.
Yeah.
I feel like I've heard some of that even in the discourse of this book.
Yeah.
And how do you respond to that? Because you're like, well, shouldn't we fix this? If Christians are misbehaving in culture just as much as culture is misbehaving, like, shouldn't we address it some way? What do we do?
Yeah, we should. We should grow up. I mean, there's no doubt about it. And I'm all about that. But like, so this is one way to grow up, this anger issue.
Yeah.
And Dallas Willard actually said, and I'm a big fan of him, but he's all about, like, we need to change as people. It's not about just, God saved me, ergo I could just be who I am. Like, no. Grace is not opposed to effort.
Yeah.
It's opposed to earning. We're supposed to grow up in the way of Jesus. He's given us a way to live. This is a way to grow up. Like, can you address the ills or injustices or hypocrisies, but do it without anger? The answer is yes.
Yeah.
But for some reason, some people are like, well, if I can't be angry about it, we're not going to do anything. Well, that's really strange. So maybe we need to do something about that first. And then we can know from some great examples historically. I cite Martin Luther King Jr. as a classic example.
Yeah. He
didn't believe in righteous anger for humans. The people who firebombed his house, he had to forgive them.
Yeah.
And he said it, but it's because of his belief in God's grace to him. He's not acting out of anger. He said, I can't act out of anger. You can't change something if you don't love it. You act out of love.
Yeah.
So, yeah, if that strikes people as, if the idea of putting anger behind us means pacifism, that means that you're conflating anger with taking action.
Yeah, right.
And I would posit that God wants us to take action, not just get angry and pat ourselves on the back for being righteously angry, which is something we do.
Yeah.
We're like, oh, I'm angry. You're not as angry as me. I'm angrier than you. That makes me bad. Like, that's not doing anything to help anyone.
It's like a badge of honor.
Right.
It's like I'll hear Christians talk about something happening in culture, and whether it's fully a true thing or something that's been blown out of proportion, either way, and then just, I'm so angry about this, and then that's the response is me too, and then it's just this.
Yeah, congrats.
Yeah, great.
Yeah. So meanwhile, no one's doing anything. Like, and if it's right, if you think it's righteous, you should pat yourself on. Look how righteous I am.
Yeah, yeah.
But it's self-righteous is what it is, and anybody can do that. Like, and I cite this in the book. I probably needed to make a bigger deal out of it, but there was a study. I want to say University of British Columbia did a study about social media and actual sacrifice, like taking action on an issue, and they found an inverse relationship between tweeting angrily and actually doing something.
Yeah, I would believe it.
Yeah,
it's a cultural thing where I think it speaks into that tribalism thing. Okay, I'll tweet this hashtag, I'll post about this issue. I've done nothing else other than that. But at least I can go to sleep at night and feel like
I'm angry about it.
I've added to the conversation, or I've made people aware of it, or something like that.
So one point I want to make about that, if somebody hasn't read the book, I spend time talking about like the people who are charged in our culture with addressing injustice.
Yeah.
Do you want them acting out of anger to do it? Because if you think, oh, I need to be angry, or we won't do anything about really. So what about the police?
Yeah.
You want the police to be angry? They're the ones like they're trying to stop injustice with judges or judicial system. Like we don't do our best when it's out of anger, but we should still do it.
I think one of the points you made that I definitely identified with is a lot of times anger is the acceptable emotion for men.
Yes.
And I think I've seen that whether it's other male relationships I've had or with family, and it's one of those things now. I almost wonder though, if because of that culturally, you're starting to see certain females think that, that this is a way a man's going to respect me more if I'm angry like them, and then it's just kind of bubbling over into this cultural thing where everybody's just angry. That's the thing that's acceptable. And I've even had conversations with people who just get red in the face and mad at me about something, and you wonder, where is this coming from? And why is, like, if they were to break down, start crying and be emotional that way, they would feel like they could never live it down. But if they got mad and started screaming, then they'd be looking for an award or something like that. It's very strange.
Well, so anger is it's a warning light on the dashboard. I mean, anger itself is not sin. I'm clear about that.
Yeah.
It's like it happens, but it's not masculine. Let's talk about that for a second.
Yeah.
Because guys do think that. Like I'm taking a card out of their masculine hand if they can't be like acting out of anger. Like what your let's say you're married. Your wife doesn't associate your anger with masculinity. She associates security with masculinity. If you make her feel secure, she finds that attractive. She's drawn to that. She doesn't want to live with an angry guy.
Yeah.
There's nothing masculine about anger. A toddler can be angry.
Yeah.
But if there's somebody who can, with clear judgment, take action to provide security for people, maybe it's the vulnerable around you, maybe it's the vulnerable in your own home.
Yeah.
It's the opposite of anger. So the anger actually makes her feel more insecure because you could blow up at any moment, or you can be sarcastic, or you can that's very unmasculine is what it is. But that is a cultural confusion that we have.
That's great. I finished Unoffendable, and I decided to start a chronological journey through your books. I just finished Blessed Are the Misfits.
Oh, cool.
So I am curious about kind of what led you to that, kind of that term of misfit Christian. I would say I really identified with that book. There's a lot in there that I'm just like, okay, this is stuff that I've been scared to say, and to hear someone who is a well-known Christian personality, a Christian author, say these things out loud, or at least, I mean, I listened to the audiobook, so that's why I definitely heard you say it out loud. But I definitely identified with that. And what was there much of a journey to get to that point where you felt safe enough to say some of those things? Because it's not like it's scandalous, but it is things that I think a lot of introverts or ambiverts kind of have in the back of their heads. Like, I don't want to participate in this out loud prayer time. I don't want to, that sort of stuff.
I think, so I talk about it in the book that I was diagnosed on the spectrum years ago, but I think it actually helps me on the radio because I don't even realize I'm being blunt. But apparently it's like, everybody's like, wow, you're not supposed to ask that question or something like that. But I don't understand why. I really don't.
Yeah.
But it makes for fetching radio to have somebody say stuff. But I was literally talking about it on the air sometimes. I don't feel God around. What's wrong with me?
Yeah.
And so I struggle with that. I remember in college, and I start the book with that, like they tried to make me feel God around, like in a basement meeting, and folding chairs were sitting there, and I didn't do what they wanted. I felt I'm a failure. Like, what? Maybe I'm such a sinner. I don't have these feelings. Everybody else is like, I feel God's presence. I'm like, I don't feel it.
Yeah.
But the more I talked about it, the more people were like, that's me too.
Yeah.
And then the more I'd read the Bible and the stories of people, like there's not a ton about these emotions.
Mm-hmm.
And I got up to talk at a church one time. This is like a really big, like, you know, they have the band and the fog lights and the lasers and holograms or whatever.
Yeah.
And I got up afterward, and again, it's kind of them to let me talk. But I said, hey, how many of you during the worship, so it's very emotional, how many of you felt like maybe you're missing something, like other people are having a more emotional experience than you are? Mm-hmm. And it was like half or more. People raised their hand.
Wow.
And like, that's instructive. And seeing each other look around. But you feel like I must be doing something wrong.
Yeah.
Because our culture at large, it's not just church cultures, you know, our culture at large is like feelings are reality. Mm-hmm. But that translates into church. So we try to create these feelings. And then those of us who don't manifest that are like, maybe God isn't real? Or maybe I'm just such a sinner, he's given up on me.
Do you think it's somewhat personality based? I mean, I think God created people with different personalities. They connect to the world differently than others.
And connect to him. Like we all have relationships with people. We relate differently to that person because we are different. And that's to the glory of God.
Yeah.
But if you don't create that space for people where you're like, hey, some people aren't feeling it, doesn't mean God's not there.
Yeah.
He's here. Like your feelings do not determine reality. Yeah. And that's awesome news too for the people who do feel it and then don't.
Yeah.
Like they have this I feel God's presence, then for months or years they don't. Like, okay, what's wrong with me?
Yeah.
What happened? Like, no, your feelings don't determine reality. You can still be faithful and loyal anyway.
Well, and I grew up in a charismatic church, and so it was like, you know, down to the evidence of the Holy Spirit is speaking in tongues and that sort of stuff.
Right.
And so it was always kind of challenging because I would feel like I could play the role pretty well sometimes, like so I could fit in. But then sometimes I'd have to question, am I being honest?
Real?
Yeah, this doesn't feel real. And so I really love that because I'm like, it's okay. I'm okay to be this way. I'm okay to embrace the part of me that's different, and that's all right. And
it's so freeing to a lot of people.
Well, and I also think you mentioned just a little bit at the beginning of the book about evangelism and how sometimes we kind of elevate the extrovert when it comes to evangelism. And you talk a lot about embracing your uniqueness and your quirks and that sort of thing. And I wonder, do you feel that goes a long way to maybe a different flavor of evangelism where it's like, no, you don't, this isn't, all Christians aren't this way.
Right.
You can be a believer. You can have God's grace, but not be exactly like this cookie cutter mold that we see.
Well, it's so scary if you're an introvert to feel like, okay, I have to go to the beach.
Yeah.
You know, I got to strike up conversations with people that are trying to have a party, and I got to go door to door. Mm-hmm. When we don't all have the gift of it is a spiritual gift.
Yeah.
Some of us are gifted at other things, and so we should root on the people that have that. I know people who I'm like, that's amazing. Go. Mm-hmm. I'll do my thing too, and we can all. But let's not make one gift the thing. Mm-hmm. Because that's not really fair. And actually, if you read Paul's letters to all these, I know this is so counterintuitive for a lot of people. They're going to be like, I disagree. But if you read his letters, he's not telling them all to evangelize constantly. He's not. Mm-hmm. But there's people that have that gift, and he's got the gift of being an apostle and doing this. There's some people that are really gifted at this and this other thing. But we make it so that everybody all the time, and we take the Great Commission, which Jesus told these disciples, again, controversial, to go into all the world. That's part of the kingdom plan. But Paul's not writing to the believers at Ephesus saying, all of you need to leave Ephesus. Mm-hmm. You all have to go to the four corners of the world. Yeah. Like I just think we lay some stuff on people. It's not quite fair when they have gifts that are perfectly good for the body, for edifying and building up the body.
Yeah.
So it's very freeing for people if to hear this, like I still have a role. It's very freeing for me to know what God wants from me is not much about emotions. Mm-hmm. He wants me to be loyal.
Yeah.
Well, if I don't feel anything for years, I can still show up, and I do. That's exactly what I do.
Yeah, right.
So I'm still out walking the dog in the morning, praying, and showing up, and talking to God about what we're doing in life together. Mm-hmm. Well, if you're an introverted, analytical person who doesn't understand some of the, you can do that.
Yeah.
And it's just wonderful. That's actually what God's looking for, is this steadfast loyalty.
Yeah, one of the things for what I do at the church here is a lot of creating social media content. So people always kind of come to me thinking I'm the social media expert. What should Christians be posting about? That sort of thought. And a lot of times I kind of embrace this thought of, well, what are you excited about? Like, what are you passionate about? Like because we need Christians intersecting with culture that are excited about whatever that is, whether it's video games, knitting, whatever it is.
Right.
That way they can see that, hey, these are believers that are like me. Oh, maybe I could fit in. Maybe I can't. So it's like it's kind of the same idea. Like don't hide that. You don't need to just go post why you're angry about this thing happening. That's not going to draw anyone to you.
Right.
And I think about how Jesus lived his life on earth and everyone was drawn to him, and sometimes almost to a fault and an unexplainable fault. Like, why is this? But anyways.
No, it's a great point.
Yeah, I love that. So you've talked a little bit about being diagnosed on the spectrum, and I that's Asperger's that you were diagnosed with, which for people listening may not understand the difference. Is it on the autism spectrum technically?
It is actually Asperger's. They've retired that phrase or that title.
Okay.
It just means high functioning on the spectrum.
Okay.
So it's mainly social stuff. I don't pick up on social cues very well, and I never have, and I've never been good with the body language. I've had to learn, like we're making eye contact now, but that is a learned thing for me, and I'm doing it because humans like this. Do it. And I don't, but I've learned. I've gotten better.
And you mentioned that's helped you in some ways on the radio because of your being able to be blunt without knowing it, maybe, and other things like that.
Totally. I've interviewed a lot of comedians. I've done some stand up here and there.
Yeah.
But a lot of people are on the spectrum.
Yeah.
In comedy, and I think it's because you feel like you stand outside, and you like so much humor is observational, and so much of our culture is absurd.
Yeah.
All cultures at some level, it's like, why are we doing this?
Yeah.
But people just take it at face value. But somebody stands outside that can see a lot of humor and absurdity. And I think that's helpful for me as a believer too, like questioning our culture, not just church culture, but the culture in general.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, and you've brought it up, and then I've kind of heard how you've interfaced with the world. And that led me to taking several online quizzes about autism just to see, like, where am I on this? Maybe I don't know that it's medically safe to agree with an online quiz. I think they say,
it's not.
Seek a professional. But it said I might have light autism, if that's the thing. I don't know what that is. I don't know. Maybe. I don't know. I'll have to look into it more. But that is, I think it's interesting to look at the world that way. I get told a lot of times, like, Eric, you sound angry. You sound mean. And I'm like, no. I'm just really passionate about this thing. Like, I love this, or I love these people. I care about this thing. And I want you to know I'm not being sarcastic. I'm not joking. Right. I'm being serious right now. So
that's funny because I've had, when I've taken jobs, like I work basically by myself with my producer now, but when I've been at a big radio network where there's a couple hundred employees, I learned when I switched jobs to announce, when they introduced me, hey, you're all going to think I'm mad at you all the time.
Yeah.
I'm not. I'm just thinking about stuff where I'm fired up about something. I don't mean to come across. I'm trying to work on forcing smiles, like, hey, everything's cool. But my default thing is looking like I'm angry about something.
Yeah.
So that's funny you said that.
Yeah. I there was a part in your book about you making toast at work and unplugging a little gray box.
Yeah.
And I just love that story because I'm fascinated by the toast thing. You love burnt toast. Do you still eat a lot of burnt toast?
I can't. I was just talking with Mark Ashton about that this morning over breakfast because he knew back when I did. I ate a loaf of toast every morning by 9 a.m.
That's wild.
Blackened, like charred, no butter, dry. And to this day, if it weren't for this nutrition thing, I would totally still do it. It's the most delicious thing in the world to me.
Yeah.
And for lunch, I would have a sleeve of saltines after breakfast of a loaf of toast. So, but apparently you can't do that.
The carbs are kind of have a bad reputation.
Yeah. And so there's this whole balanced diet thing. It's catching on. And so I'm trying to get in on that action. But I love toast so much.
So you really love the food pyramid where all the grains and everything
right down here. I just want to inhabit the bottom of that pyramid.
Yeah.
I liked that. Yeah.
One of the phrases you've used is compassion without compromise. And I think it seems like that's kind of a mantra that you live by in some ways, but I wonder what is that? What does that mean to you? Like, what is?
I am not kidding, and I love this question. I don't remember using that phrase.
Really? Okay, where did I?
Doesn't mean I didn't say it.
Yeah, maybe
it's cool.
Maybe it's something that I've just completely made up.
I'm saying TM, Brant Hansen, compassion without compromise, TM.
Just put it right there.
Got it.
It's going to be on the back of your next book.
T-shirt.
Maybe it's the title of your next book.
Yes.
There it is.
The next book is called Compassion Without Compromise. I think you're really going to like it.
All right. Yeah. So I made this up completely, and I just wanted to give you an idea for a book title.
I'm so embarrassed.
No, it's fine. I'm the one who's just like, I've been listening to your audiobooks and just making things up in my head.
I love it, man.
It's very good.
Should have put that in.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad we got that there. If you can cut me in a little bit when that book releases, let me know.
You got it.
Okay. And that's great because I don't know why I would make something up like that, but I do think that if you haven't said it, I think you've leaned towards this idea of, no, understand what you're mad about before you're mad about it, right? Like, get to know these people. I think the stories you've told about allowing people from the inner city into your home and getting to know them, and to me, that was something that it's like, okay, that's challenging me because it's just tough to do that sometimes, to just bring in all these other people's baggage and then you add that to your own drama. And
I hear you.
Yeah, but it's
like we're empty nesters now, so that changes the dynamic a little bit. Like when we had kids, we wouldn't have been as free flowing with our home.
Yeah,
we had kids in the house. Like you can't. But I do have a high quirk tolerance. I have an HQT, and I think it's because of practicing this. This gets easier, this whole thing where you're not shocked by human behavior anymore. It gets easier as you practice it.
Yeah.
So I refer to like traffic as forgiveness practice because it's like this low level, low leverage. That person who cut you off, that's not about you.
Yeah.
And they're not going to get to the food, the last, turkey leg on the planet, and then now you're going to start. Like, you can pray, God, please bless that person. Let them have peace today. And whatever they're trying to achieve, you can feel your own anger melt away when you do that.
Yeah.
So it's practice, and what happens is you start to implicitly your second nature response to people doing stuff becomes more patient because people are messed up. We should. That's my whole thing. Like for Christians, we know everybody's fouled up because we are.
Yeah.
And there's scripture in there a couple times I think where it said no one needed. But Jesus knew what they were thinking. No one needed to tell him what men were like. Like, we know people are, if we have the mind of Christ, and yet he's still like, Father, forgive them. It doesn't make it what they're doing okay, that they're nailing him to a cross, but he's still saying, Father, forgive them. It doesn't make it, it's not relativism. It's understanding. I know people are messed up. I know what God's done for me. I don't forgive people because they deserve it. I forgive them because I didn't. Like that's the whole resource again, back to that. But this becomes a way of life, and you develop a patience for people that maybe other people can't handle. But you're like, I like this guy. He's like that, but that's cool because he's got this other thing.
Yeah, it's seeing that uniqueness in people.
Yes.
And I think sometimes I'll hear Christians say, oh, well, you're condoning their behavior by engaging with them or being seen with them or whatever. And it's one of the most frustrating things to me ever because I'm thinking, as Jesus is our example, what was he condoning the behavior of the people he interacted with?
Like they accused him of the exact same thing.
Yeah, yeah.
Like in no way. In no way. So I know this, and I wrote another book called The Truth About Us, about cognitive biases and whatnot, but how humans actually work. We think we're really rational.
Yeah.
We're not. We're led by our emotions and intuitions. And we use our rationality to back up our emotions and intuition. So Jonathan Haidt, this guy at New York University, calls himself agnostic, but he talked about how humans work. It's like an elephant and a rider. The elephant's going to go where you can't control that. And our rationality is the rider, but the elephant is the emotions and intuition. So that controls our decision making. And we use our reasoning to say, well, this is why it's good that I wanted to do this. He said the only thing that turns that elephant, like if people are like, I don't like Christians. I don't like Christianity. I think it's all a bunch of baloney. They're never going to change their mind. He said, but there's only one thing that would actually lead them to change their mind. There's only one thing that makes that elephant actually stop and lean one direction. That's relationships. Relationships make it plausible for someone to go, maybe Christianity is not.
Yeah.
Just a bunch of, because I know Eric, and he actually he's for me. If you're for somebody, it's very difficult for them to not like you.
Yeah.
It's really, now that elephant's leaning towards you when you have something to say.
Yeah.
Our whole neighborhood, they know we're believers.
Yeah.
They know, and they can be as scandalously whatever as they want to be, and we're not going to flinch.
Yeah.
But they know who we are, and conversations come up, and the elephant starts leaning our direction. I see it over and over and over, where they're open to us talking about Jesus, and we have these conversations after we have a relationship where they know we're their biggest fans.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that was one thing when I was a kid. I was always kind of drawn to the outliers and the misfits,
Yeah.
and then I'd always get in trouble for it. But I was the pastor's kid, and so people would be like, "Why are you getting in trouble? Why are you doing this? Why are you?"
Yeah.
And it's like, and I see it in my own children now, where they tend to be drawn to that, and I love it. I want them to
do
be.
too.
It's like I
Yeah.
want you guys to. I said you don't mimic the behavior, but
Right.
you still can be a friend.
Yeah,
And-
be for them.
yeah,
And that's what I mean. You can love people in theory, but if you want to go crazy, actually like them. And when you pray for blessings on somebody, your heart turns towards them, and you do start rooting for them, even if they're really highly annoying to everybody else. You'll have this grace that you can draw on, where you actually I like this guy. I actually like him. I'm for him, and then that man to him probably has annoying everybody else in his life. Like he's got one person that's for him, happens to be somebody who's a Jesus person.
Well, and I love that sentiment so much more than what I hear sometimes in churchy settings where you're talking about evangelizing to a person or something like that, and it feels like they're the project, right?
Yeah.
Oh, I've got this project that I'm working on, and to me it feels so dehumanizing to that person. It's like they're no different than you.
No,
they're the same thing.
This person is precious.
Yeah.
It's not my project.
Right.
Like, so all I can do is be faithful in the moment. And that's a big thing for me. I don't know what I'm doing in my career. I don't have a plan. I've got no vision. I haven't had one. But my thing has been, God, let me be faithful with whatever comes across my path today, whoever is right in front of me. And he's been good to honor that. And so I think that's true in your neighborhood, your personal relationships. Like whoever comes across my path today, I'm dialed in on that person, that need. And I'll see God can do the big vision. It's his project. This is his project. I'm just going to be faithful with what he puts in my path today. I'm not going to worry about tomorrow, what I messed up yesterday, but these precious people walking around, like that's my job.
Do you have any? I mean, you're a great storyteller. I'm always amazed as reading the two books that I have. You have so many anecdotes and just life experiences that you've ran into. I mean, is there anything a story that you can think of at the moment that would kind of encapsulate this thought of embracing the outsiders, where you've done that and kind of seen a change?
Yeah. Well, yes.
Putting you on the spot here.
No, I can think of a few, and I want. It's going to sound like a hero story, but like I'm the hero or we're the heroes. But I'm saying, like, as a believer, we can share stories.
Yeah,
and I'm learning. Right. So there's one guy in the neighborhood. I really like this guy. I'll call him Ted, just to make up a name.
Okay.
But he had brain damage, and couldn't walk very easily. He's younger and very earnest, but very talkative with everybody in the neighborhood. And he organized something called Walking for Wellness, where he was like, I'll meet at the community building. He would come into the workout area in our community and be like, hey, I'm going to lead this thing. And people were like, okay. Well, I saw him out by himself for Walking for Wellness. It's like, okay, well, I can walk for wellness. I can do that. So we walk, and he liked to listen to music. I'm like, hey, you like music? Like, yeah, I love to sing. So he has this big, not on tune all the time. I'm like, hey, come on over, because I love playing guitar. I would do 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, whatever, you know, and we jammed.
Yeah.
Like he's like, let's do this, let's do that. And then we did it repeatedly. And then he announced that they were leaving the neighborhood. Now, his family, not believers, and he was way into like satanic stuff, like the trappings of it, like Halloween stuff and death metal and all that to say, we're like, we're throwing you a party. Yeah. Okay. So we invited the neighborhood, like Ted's moving away. You all know who Ted is. You've met him. And so we're having a party at our house. Threw the doors open. It's like 7 o'clock. Nobody's there except my wife and Greg and Ted and me. Oh. And I was starting to think, well, he seems okay with it. We had streamers and we had pizza and everything. And our neighbors came over because we asked them. So they stayed for a little bit. And then some more people showed up. Yeah. And then more and more. And the house was jammed.
Wow.
And he could not believe it. And his parents could not believe it, that he was so loved. And I saw them the next morning. And like a lot of parents, I think they viewed the stuff he was dealing with as kind of a curse. And why did this happen? But I saw him the next morning and they were like, we didn't know he was so loved. And it made us think about God. Like maybe he's the way he is because God wants to use him in some way. Like that was the sweetest thing.
Yeah.
But it's just throwing parties. We threw parties for our lawn people. They're all from Guatemala. Wow. I'm like, we're providing lunch for everybody. Cranked up the Spotify Guatemala top 50 hits, and had a big, and our neighbors like, what in the world? Like even like,
yeah,
they welcome everybody.
Yeah.
And so again, we're learning this. This is not normal, but that is the vibe.
Yeah.
Is that we're the people, you cannot take us, if you took us out of that neighborhood, just like the last time we had to move, the neighbors were like really sad. Yeah. Because you're the party people. You're the ones who welcome us. You're the weird Christians. Yeah. But no one loves us like that. Yeah. And that has been a recurring theme, and we've just gotten better at it.
And man, what a better testimony to be the weird Christians than to be the hateful Christians,
and
or something else.
We're the party people. We're the connectors.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
That's great.
It's so different for us, too, because I'm introverted. My wife's not super extrovert. But this is, by golly, we got nothing to lose. What's to lose? So why not have some fun with it?
That's great. That's great. So I have to ask this because I feel like you've probably been labeled the unoffendable guy.
Yeah.
Can you give me one example where you haven't followed your book very well in the past, 8 years since you've written it?
I'm actually seething with anger about the compassion without compromise.
That thing really upset you.
But I did, yeah.
Okay, good.
So
that's really a plant. I put that in there to offend the unoffendable man, as like, if I put this question here and say he said this.
You can do some yoga. So I'm going to mention this talking this morning at the church, but after Unoffendable was out, like sneaky hit, right? Like nobody expected it. It was just word of mouth. No big promotional budget. But it's been out for like a year or two. It's a hit. And there's some pastor comes out with a book. He calls it Unoffendable. Like, bro, and I went on Twitter. Yeah. And I said something to, and I almost was snarky. And I'm like, how's it going to look if the two guys who wrote the book's Unoffendable get in a fight?
Yeah, they're both mad at each other. That's great.
No, I'm trying to think. You do get better at it, I promise. Just like free throw practice. You practice this so that when something happens in the big game, it's second nature. You become a different person. Right. I'm sure. Well, no, like traffic. If I'm in a hurry, I become a different person.
Yeah. I was going to say I am okay in traffic, but when someone doesn't use their blinker, I get very upset, and I feel pretty justified.
It's like, so you got a BMW there. You guys, you have a blinker?
Yeah.
They don't make them with.
They don't install them anymore.
I have found myself, ironically, recently, I was frustrated with traffic, and then having to be like, I just talked about Unoffendable to a group in LA. Like, dude, it's small stuff, but I want to check that. Yeah. I want to check it because the small stuff becomes everything.
Right. So. Well, as we start to draw to a close here, do you have any, I got to give you a chance to promote anything you're working on, anything like that? I know your most recent book was The Men We Need. Yeah. That was a year ago, I think that came out.
Yeah. Like as a guy, I think you might find it refreshing if you're a guy that doesn't, like, you don't hunt elk by hand or whatever, and you're not running with the bulls in Pamplona.
That does speak to me to not be that way.
Yes. So I kind of have a take on masculinity that I think is different, and I think it's resonated. Because people are like, that is it.
That's great.
That's the thing. So you might like that. I have a new book coming out in January called Life is Hard, God is Good, Let's Dance.
Okay.
And it's about anxiety and about how we don't need to be anxious. Yeah. And here's why. Even if you know everything that's going on in the world, You still don't have to be. It's not crazy. It's not naive. You're not ignorant. You actually need to know more, and that more is really good. So that's the idea of that book. So yeah.
So if anybody wants more Brant Hansen, or as I like to call you, Brant Handsome. Sorry, I just had to say it.
And
I saw the picture on the back of the book, and I was like, "This is a handsome guy."
Is it misleading?
No, I think in person I'm a little struck. So
Good,
it's good.
good.
Yeah,
That's all I ask.
Yeah,
is
it's
for
very
people to be
intimidated.
struck. Good. Well, the podcast, we do the Brant and Sherry Oddcast.
Okay.
So Brant and Sherry Oddcast, if you like, it's quirky. There are earnest attempts at humor, and then there's earnest attempts at some insight too. So,
Yeah. Okay.
yeah.
Well, Brant, this has been awesome. I could do podcasts forever, so I would go another hour, but
We totally could.
we have time constraints. So.
Yeah. Thanks, man. Great job.
Yeah, thank you for taking the time to do this. Really appreciate
pleasure.
it. Awesome. If you're listening right now and you have any questions or concerns, you want to reach out to us, you can do that on our social media account. You can reach out to us on Instagram or TikTok at CCCOMA Podcast. You can send us an email to podcast@cccomaha, not OMA, omaha.org, or you can call us and leave us a voicemail, 402-885-9930. Any way you reach out, we'd love to hear from you. And until next time, we'll talk to you then.